Senator Hillary Clinton in just a moment. First, though, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Barack Obama. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a seat.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. This is nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see
We'll
you.
start by tackling a big topic, God. Do you think that God takes sides in a war? For example, in the war on terror, is God on the side of U.S. troops, would you say?
Well, you know, I always remember Abraham Lincoln when, during the Civil War, he said, we shouldn't be asking whose side God is on, but whether we're on his side. And I think that's the question that all of us have to ask ourselves during any battle that's taking place, whether it's political or military, is are we following his dictates? Are we advancing the causes of justice and freedom? Are we our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper? And that's how I measure whether what we're doing is right.
The president talks a lot, as you know, about sort of good versus evil in war. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do think there's evil in the world. I think that when planes crash into buildings and kill innocents, there's evil there. I think violence and cruelty, wherever it's perpetrated, expresses evil in the world. And I think that all of us have an obligation to speak to that and act against that forcefully. Now, there have been times in our history where that requires that we take up arms. I think that the Civil War was a just war. I believe that defeating fascism and ensuring that Europe was liberated was the right thing to do. What was also interesting about Lincoln, though, during the course of the Civil War was his recognition that simply because we've engaged in something just doesn't mean that there aren't times where we may act unjustly. Abu Ghraib obviously is something that all of us should be ashamed for, even if you were supportive of a war. I believe Guantanamo, the decision to detain people without charges, is unjust. And so the danger of using good versus evil in the context of war is it may lead us to be not as critical as we should be about our own actions. And that's something that I'm very wary about.
You have been very clear in your support of Israel. Do you think the Palestinians in the occupied territories are being treated morally and fairly and justly by the Israelis?
I believe that the Israelis want peace, and they want security. And oftentimes, in the midst of achieving security, there have been times where there's no doubt that Palestinians have been placed in situations that we wouldn't want our own families to be placed in. Israelis have been killed. They've got bombs flying into their territories right now. And we would expect them to act appropriately in defending themselves. So when I look at the situation in the Middle East, and this is true in other conflicts around the world, the question I ask myself, and this is where I do think faith comes in, is there a way for us to reconcile the claims of both sides of a conflict in a way that leads to resolution and a better life for all people? And that, I think, is something that can be achieved, but it's going to require some support on the Palestinian side. They have to recognize Israel's existence. They have to renounce violence and terrorism as a tool to achieve their political ends. They have to abide by agreements. In that context, I think the Israelis will gladly say, let's move forward in negotiations that would allow them to live side by side with the Palestinians in peace and security. But we are so far from that right now, partly because when your brothers or sisters have been killed in a suicide bombing, when you feel that you've been oppressed or treated unjustly, it's very hard to get out of that immediate anger and seek reconciliation. And that's where I think faith can inform what we do. Faith can say, forgive someone who has treated us unjustly. Faith can say that regardless of what's happened in the past, there's a brighter future ahead. And that's the kind of faith that I think has to inform not just our international policies, but also domestic policies as well.
I want to open it up to our host, the Reverend Jim Wallace, the editor-in-chief of Sojourners. Reverend Wallace, why don't you have a stand up there?
Hello, Senator.
Good to see you, Jim. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Did we find out how old Jim was?
25.
25.
Let's change the subject. As you know from your organizing days, the poor are trapped in poverty, but they're also trapped in our debate over poverty, both sides blaming the other. You are one who's called for new ways of doing politics. The old answers aren't working, they're failing. If you were the president, what kind of moral and political imagination would you bring to finding some real solutions and try and give us some specifics?
I think our starting point has to be based on the notion that I just expressed. I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, that we are connected as a people. That when, as I said in my speech at the Boston Convention, when there's a child somewhere here in Washington, D.C. who is impoverished in a crumbling school without prospects and hope for the future, then that impoverishes me. If there's a veteran in Chicago that's foraging through a dumpster because he's now homeless, because we did not provide him the services that he needed after he had served our country, that diminishes all of our patriotism. So the starting point is that I've got a stake in other people. And I've got